أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Amma ba'd. Yesterday we looked at this one surah, Surah Al-Ma'un. I'm going to continue and just look at the last couple of lines, but we have been talking in general about nifaq, this two-facedness, this insincerity that can creep into the hearts of Muslims, and sometimes it festers into all-out kufr and irtidad and rejection of faith in the guise of Islam. And sometimes it is seemingly less noxious and subtle in our hearts, but the takeaway from the message of the Quran should be that all of those even minute relics of nifaq that might be there in our heart are dangerous and should be addressed and inshallah driven out of our hearts. In Surah Al-Ma'un, Allah talks about people who have rejected judgment and accountability, or, as is probably more likely for the likes of the congregation, we haven't rejected it at all, but sometimes we're not so heedful of it. And we might forget, we might not have it at the forefront of our mind, and because of that rejection or heedlessness of the judgment day, it leads to certain vices, certain faults. And we can use these as indicators within ourselves or within others that they have this nifaq because they have this quality. So one was that they take advantage of the orphans. They turn them away. The orphan can't fend for himself, and this person, thinking there's no God and no judgment and no accountability, he feels comfortable in exercising his strength and pushing the orphan away, depriving the orphan of what his due is. When it comes to the poor more generally, they don't feed the poor and they don't encourage others to feed the poor, and maybe even dissuade people with that phrase from Surah Yasin, "An-nut'imu man law yasha'u Allahu at'ama." Why should we feed this poor person when obviously God's favor has gone from the person? And who am I to go against God's judgment against that person? Then Allah says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, which is always a shocking verse, and I think it's good to stop there. Right? As it's the end of a verse, it's mustahab to stop at the end of each verse, take a breath, and Allah has chosen to make the break there for the shock factor, to wake us up. I pray. Why is Allah saying punishment upon those who pray? Of course, the message comes in the next verse, those people who pray with heedlessness. But because heedlessness is so common in all of us, at some point, if we're not constantly vigilant, constantly careful, it's very easy for us to be heedless during moments of our prayer, maybe during the entire prayer, and the prayer can go by and we haven't thought about Allah once. We haven't thought about anything that we recited once because our mind is somewhere else. It's not unusual for that to happen unless we're really conscious and vigilant. Then he talks about those who are mura'i, those who are ostentatious in their acts of worship. This is where we left off yesterday. So this ostentation, riya is the Arabic word for it. Sum'a is a counterpart. So riya comes from ra'a yara, to see, and sum'a comes from sami'a yasma'u, which means to hear. So they're both different kinds of ostentation. It's just a matter of what the means is for that showing off to happen. If I want people to see what I do and to praise me because they see that I'm such a good person, that's riya. And if I want them to hear through reputation, through the passing of information through people about how good I am, then that's sum'a. But both these words come, and if you look in this dua, Abi Hamza al-Thumani, there's also a line where we're asking for protection from both riya and sum'ah. So this riya is a way to undermine our acts of ibadah. So it's possible that we do things that are good, thinking that we're racking up points and we're building ourselves, but at the same time we are actually undermining those very efforts. And it's like we have a bucket that we think we're filling with good deeds, but we don't realize that we've knocked holes in the same bucket, and at the end there's nothing left in the thing that we thought was full of our good deeds. This riya is that it eats away at those good deeds. It actually nullifies the good deeds. Even from a fiqhi perspective, it's not just an akhlaqi issue. It's not just a nice to have that we avoid riya. It's an essential component just for our prayer to be correct from a legal perspective. And this is also a good framework to have in mind. I've mentioned this before, but we have this idea of the correctness of your act of ibadah. To make your prayer correct, like sahiha, you have to fulfill the fiqhi requirements. There are legal requirements that you have tahara, you've done wudu for instance, your clothing is free of impurity, the place you're praying is free of impurity, you're facing the qibla, the time for prayers will come in, and you've done all of the arkan, all of the wajibat of the prayer. So if you've done all of the legal requirements and you can check off all those boxes, your prayer is correct. A correct prayer, the benefit of a correct prayer is that you won't be punished for not praying. A correct prayer gets you out of hellfire. That's not mi'raj al-mu'min. Right? The prayer is supposed to be this kind of mi'raj that we can all engage in. The potential's there in the prayer to take us there. But to do that, we have to do more than just that bare minimum correct prayer. What we really should aspire to and aim for is a prayer that's not only sahiha, but maqbula, acceptable to Allah. And to do that, there's more that you have to do than just check off the boxes that from a fiqhi perspective, I've done everything correct. Now I need to actually, the main ingredient is that hudurul qalb. I have to have attention to the prayer. I have to actually be focusing on what I'm saying and what I'm doing during the prayer. What's the significance of the sajda? What am I symbolizing through sajda or through ruku'? What are the words that I'm speaking? Sometimes we're looking for, people asking, what should I think about during the prayer? If I'm supposed to be focusing, what am I supposed to be thinking about? They're words. We're saying words the whole time. Words have meaning. That's what we're supposed to be thinking about. Again, there's no secret, there's no hidden key to salvation and goodness. Shaykh Bahjat, rahmatullahi alayhi, this is one of his common lessons. So some of his students would tell people this, because people would think of Shaykh Bahjat, Irfan seems like this mystery, and how do you get there? It's some sort of a mysterious path. And Shaykh Bahjat's common advice to people was that there's no secret path. The way to get to Allah is the obvious things that He's put right there in front of you. What is the obvious commandment that He's repeated over and over again in the Quran? Salah, zakah. Right, these are the keys. Don't look for some special amal, special ibadah for 40 days, say this dhikr, and these kinds of things. There's nothing like that. It wouldn't even make sense, he says, in the logic of God. He wants nothing more than for all of us to achieve salvation. That is his hope for us. It would make him happiest if all of humanity, from beginning to end, would all do everything perfectly and beautifully and achieve salvation. He wants us to find the path. Why would He make it hidden and mysterious and not tell us exactly what He wants from us? The things that He tells us, obviously, the things that He tells us repeatedly, those are the things that we should focus on more. So, aqimus salah and atus zakah is repeated over and over again. Well, those are the two main things you should be focusing on. And to the extent that you can do that, that salvation is waiting there for you. It's obvious. The only difficulty is in actually doing it. that one dhikr that we're looking for. We think that I can just, for 40 days, I can just say some dhikr over and over again, and somehow that's going to be the key. And then I'm off the hook for the rest of it. Because the prayer, doing that for my entire life, 5 times a day, every day, with attention, it's really taxing. That's hard. This is dhikr, maybe that's easier, so I can get a shortcut. It doesn't work. The reason why the prayer is important, the prayer is also difficult, and engaging in it, really, with attention, is taxing and draining. It's a training process. If we can focus those few moments each day in the prayer, then that's going to change us as people. We'll become musallin, we'll become people who are accustomed to prayer, where prayer is now part of our character, not just something we do. That's the goal. We want to become people who are charitable, people who are accustomed to worship Allah. It should become part of our character. All right, so this riya then eats away at that. Even at the fiqhi level, even at the correctness level of prayer, if you do everything else right and check off all those legal boxes that the prayer is correct, but the intention behind or for which you do the prayer is because there's this person in the audience, I want them to see how well I pray. I want them to hear how well I pray. I want to give this charity. I want people to know that I'm very generous and praise me for that. If that creeps into our mind, then that action is not even acceptable. It's not even correct. In fact, you have to redo that prayer if that idea creeps into your mind. It's an incorrect prayer. It doesn't even satisfy. It doesn't even check off the boxes. Not to mention, it doesn't get you anywhere spiritually. All right, so riya is that kind of disease that can creep in, and it eats away at the act of ibadah in that really essential way. Now, there are ideas that sometimes people have that, maybe this intention, this way of thinking, maybe this will also be riya, and then we get a little bit over paranoid. Paranoia in acts of ibadah is not the goal. So if I'm emphasizing riya and saying you have to redo your prayer if you have riya, that's not the goal. If you come away from this thinking that, okay, I have to redo all my prayers, and every time I pray a prayer, I have to pray it 10 times before I can get the intention right, that kind of waswasa, that kind of paranoia about your ibadah is the wrong outcome from these sorts of things. Right? Allah never wants us to have to redo things over and over again. It's just to be more attentive. And again, to correct this and get the riya out of our hearts, it's not some kind of silver bullet that we're looking for. Allah is there to help us. Every test that He tests us with, He's there to help us get through that test. I would say cheat, but that sounds bad. But He's right there to tell us the answers, to give us the answers. All we have to do is ask Him constantly for help, and He'll help us through the same test that He's given us. It's not that He gives us the test, then we're on our own. The test is there. He's also there to help us through the test. And so if I find at any point in my prayer that some person's attention and their praise is important to me, just stop what you're doing, clear your mind, refocus on Allah, ask Him to help you to purify your intention, and then continue. Right? You don't have to redo the prayer. You caught yourself just in time. Just correct yourself, correct your course, ask Allah for help, and then keep going. Yeah, like with even other fiqhi problems, if you have some problem in the middle of the prayer, just stop and then fix it and then keep going. So there are 5 things. Shaykh Sadr actually laid this out in one of his books, and from that I've kind of built up the idea. But I'll share one hadith with you that gives you some idea of what I'm talking about. Zurara ibn A'yan, one of the companions of the 5th and 6th Imams. He comes to Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. And he says, I asked Imam Baqir about a man who does a good act, then another man sees him, and this brings the actor joy. Right, so I recite Quran, let's say the wajib act, I give my charity, I write my check for zakah, and somebody sees me doing it. Maybe he even looks over my shoulder and sees the size of the check I've written. And I did it for Allah's sake, but now the fact that this person sees me also makes me happy. And maybe he even says something, mashallah, that's very generous of you to give so much for this good cause. And now that also comes into my mind, of course that makes me happy that the person is complimenting me, saying something good about me, making some dua for me. So I did it for the right reason, but now I'm also happy. So now does this mess with my intention or not? The Imam's answer, he says, there's no problem with that. Everyone loves to appear good in front of people, as long as he did not do it for that. Right? Was he giving that zakah, praying that prayer, doing whatever, doing that hajj, was he doing it for the sake of getting that praise? He was waiting, looking, hoping that he'd get close to that person, say it so that person hears and sees. Was that his whole intention? Or no, he did it sincerely, he did it for Allah's sake, but then this was by the way. By the way, that's so the Imam is telling us that's a natural thing to want to like praise. We all like that when people say good things about us. So that shouldn't interfere in our minds that, oh, because I enjoyed the fact that the person said something good about me, then that act was insincere. No, you can think within yourself and say that no, it was sincere, but I also felt happy. Another example, as I worship, sometimes maybe the thought of riya comes in. Now that you've learned this lesson or it's kind of refreshed it in your mind, maybe you become a little bit paranoid. By Fajr time, when you start praying, you start praying and then you think, well, do I have riya in my heart right now? Am I doing it for the wrong reason? Just the question comes in your mind as you're doing the act. Is the question coming into your mind and the doubt coming into your mind, is that riya? No, absolutely not. It's one thing to think about riya and check yourself and say, is riya in me or not? I'm checking. That doesn't mean that it is there. So the idea of riya in your mind shouldn't give you waswasa that now I thought about it, so now I have to redo the prayer, for instance. No, you thought of it because you wanted to check yourself. You saw it wasn't there or it was there and you got rid of it. So all that's fine. That doesn't mess with your intention. Another example, if I have an injured reputation. So maybe there were some rumors, somebody said something and it was untrue, unfounded, but it passes around the community that, oh, there's something bad about his character. So there's that kind of, maybe people think that I don't say my prayers. And so then I make the intention, I want to come to Jama'ah prayer, I want to pray my prayers here in the masjid for Allah's sake, but I'm also trying to fix my reputation. I want people to know that I take prayer very seriously. Right? So here also he says this is fine. There's no problem with this because the intention behind the prayer is for God's sake, and the kind of side effect is that people's reputation or people's ideas about you and that injured reputation will also be fixed. That people will now see that he's very regular in prayer. He's he's one of the regular attendees of Jama'ah. So whatever was said was definitely unfounded because look, he's there all the time. So this is also not a kind of riya. This is perfectly a fine kind of intention. Another one is, what about to teach someone? When you have young children, you have a convert next to you, so you say, pray with me, you pray behind me, pray next to me, and just do whatever I do. So now you're saying your wajib prayer for Allah's sake, but you also have an eye to the convert next to you, to the child next to you, that you're trying to teach them, and you're showing them what you're doing. Is that riya? No, it's not. You're not trying to get their praise and that kind of a thing. You're showing them, you're demonstrating to them how to pray a sincere prayer. You're praying it for God's sake, but you're also modeling it for that person so they can see how to pray and they can do as you do and slowly learn. That's also a perfectly good intention, and there's no riya in that example. And the last one is to do an act of worship both for Allah's sake, but also to encourage other people to do good. Right? That's also a good intention. Right? The key behind these last three is that there is no egoism in these intentions. If I'm doing it for Allah's sake and to teach someone, it's not about me, it's trying to teach that person to get him also on the path to get closer to Allah. If I'm doing it and I'm trying to encourage other people, I'm doing it for Allah's sake and I'm trying to encourage other people also to do it for Allah's sake. Right? It's not about me, it's not about getting their praise for myself, It's to also encourage them and help them and teach them and all of that on the same path towards Allah. That's why even though there are two intentions, one is for Allah's sake, one is to educate the person. For Allah's sake, to encourage people. But these are godly intentions that you're adding to this other godly intention, and that's perfectly fine. It's not a selfish intention where you're trying to bring people's praise upon yourself. So a couple of examples, a couple of scenarios that you can think of that sometimes people might think this is also riyā because there's something other than God, but actually no, the Imams have given their stamp of approval that these intentions are also correct. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. This praise is a really difficult thing to deal with. I've spoken about this in a Jummah khutbah before. There are hadith about this. Man madahaka faqad aqarak. If someone praises you, it's like they've slaughtered you, they've killed you. Right? Because, for this very reason, that praise, when you come and you say, mashallah, this is the best brother, this is such a good person, he's really sincere, he does so many good things, and you start praising the person in his presence, that simply props up the person's ego. The right way to do it is to either you can thank the person or you can say dua. That would be a much more productive way to offer the same encouragement to a person. I've done something good, come and say, may Allah give you more tawfiq to do similar things. So now you both encouraged me and shown your praise, but you've done it in a way that's very godly. And you're making dua it reminds me it's not that I'm so good, but you're encouraging me to do more of this, that Allah should give you more tawfiq to do similar acts. Right? So that kind of dua is the right way. If you have to praise someone or feel the need to praise someone, instead of praising them and saying, you're so good and you're such a sincere person and you're so spiritual and you these kinds of things, make dua. May Allah increase your tawfiq in this way. May He accept these acts from you. And those are good ways to deal with it. And if you are the object of the praise, Imam Ali alayhi salam gives us some remedy for how to deal with people who praise you. In Khutbatul Muttaqeen, he's describing the different attributes of those who are God-fearing. And one of the attributes he mentions for the muttaqi person is that when somebody praises him, he says the following dua. The beginning is, Allahumma ana a'lamu bi nafsi minhum. Right? I know myself better than this guy knows me, the one who's just praised me. Wa anta a'lamu bi min nafsi. And you know me better than I know myself. That's the first declaration. Then there are three du'as. He says, Allahumma la tu'akhidhni bima yaqulun. Don't hold me accountable for what this person is saying. He's praised me. If he's done something wrong, that's on him. Don't hold me accountable for his praise of me. وَاغْفِرْ لِي مَا لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. He's praised me for something he saw from me. There's so much he doesn't know about me that he would not praise me for. So forgive me for those things that he doesn't know about in my character and my actions that are not praiseworthy. In your mercy, you've only shown him the praiseworthy things, and he's praised me for that. But there's so much more that is not praiseworthy, maybe even worthy of scolding. And you've hidden that from him, so forgive me for those things that this person doesn't know about in me. And then thirdly, we say, وَجَعَلْنِي خَيْرًا مِمَّا يَظُنُّونَ. Actually, make me better than what he's praising me for. That's a very beautiful dua, and if you pay attention, there's a sequence to it. Because in the first one, we're saying, لَا تُؤَاخِذْنِي بِمَا يَقُولُونَ. He's praised me for something. Right? The act of praising is something that we're distancing ourselves from that. Right? So we don't want to get involved with the praise or accept the praise and get deluded by it into thinking that we're very good. So we're separating ourselves from that praise. And then we're remembering our own faults that the person hasn't seen. That's again grounding me. There's so much in me that's not praiseworthy that I seek forgiveness for. And then the last one is really profound and beautiful. We're actually making good use of the praise. That person's praised me as, mashallah, you're such a good person, you're such a pious person. Oh Allah, make me better than that. Even though I recognize that's not actually the reality of who I am, but I want to be better than what they see in me, which is this idealized, one-sided version of me, make me even better than that. Right? So that series of du'as is something to keep in mind when praise is offered. Then this is the remedy, to reground yourself, humble yourself, connect yourself with Allah, so that the praise doesn't get to your head and then lead to something like riya. Because after riya is for seeking that praise. Right? I'm showing off to garner that praise, get that praise from you. So these ideas are all interconnected. Recite salawat ala Muhammad wa alihi. The last phrase of Surah Al-Ma'un is وَيَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ. The last attribute of this person who doesn't believe in the hereafter or doesn't pay attention to the hereafter is that he refuses to give the neighborly and kind of normal assistance that we give one another. This phrase is very interesting. Ma'un, it's used for very small kind of petty things that on a daily basis we exchange with one another. You come over, you're my neighbor, you knock at the door, I run out of sugar, can I get a cup of sugar? And I say, absolutely, I give you a cup of sugar. You don't think about it, you don't think, like, make sure you pay me for it or anything like that. It's just an easy thing. Sugar, salt, there's snow, I don't have a shovel, my shovel's broken, can I borrow your snow shovel? Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead and take it. It's in the garage. Go take it. That kind of very easy lending and borrowing that happens between neighbors and friends and family, those things that you exchange are called ma'un. So this person, he refuses even to do those kinds of things. You come over and you say, can I borrow one of these things? You say, no, sorry. Last time you didn't return it, so I don't want to give it this time, for instance. Or, something like that, but he's stingy and he doesn't want to give that kind of assistance. I think the overall structure of this surah, it's in three parts. There are three main characteristics that this munafiq has. The root cause was yukathibu bid-deen, that he rejects the judgment and accountability. What happens because of that? Three things. One is with regard to people who are beneath him from a socioeconomic perspective. The other is his interactions with the one above him, who is Allah. And the third is his interactions with the people who are in the same socioeconomic status. Right? So the first one was dealing with the orphan and the poor, people beneath you in terms of socioeconomic status. The munafiq doesn't deal with them properly. He takes advantage of them. He refuses to help them. With regard to Allah, in his salah, he's sahi. He's heedless of his prayer, so he doesn't deal with Allah correctly. And then thirdly, يَمْنَعُونَ الْمَاعُونَ, with his peers, his friends, his neighbors, people in his own socioeconomic class, he doesn't even deal with them properly. He doesn't help them when they need help. He doesn't lend them things easily. So in all three major kind of connections that we're supposed to be having with people, this person is a failure. Why? It's all because of that lack of faith in the judgment and accountability before Allah. Let me share one hadith with you about this ma'un. Recite one salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So Abu Basir narrates from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who says that this ma'un is al-qard, taqriduhu wal-ma'rufu tasna'uhu wa mata'ul bayt tu'iruhu. He says that it's that small loan that you lend somebody. This is ma'un. Or it's that little good deed that you do for somebody. Or it's those small things around your house that you lend to somebody. وَمِنْهُ الزَّكَاةِ. Zakah and sadaqah, those things also are part of this ma'un, he says. Then the person asks, قُلْتُ إِنَّ لَنَا جِيرَانًا إِذَا أَعَرْنَاهُمْ مَتَاعًا كَسَرُوهُ وَأَفْسَدُوهُ فعلينا جناح أن نمنعهم. So then the narrator, Abu Basir, he says, similar to my example, that I have neighbors, and whenever I lend them something, they break it, they ruin it. And so I'm averse to lending them things just because of this bad history, not because I'm stingy. He says, is it sinful for me not to lend him in the future because of the bad history that I have with them? The Imam says, no. لَيْسَ عَلَيْكَ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَمْنَعَهُم إِذَا كَانُوا كَذَلِكَ. If your neighbors are like that, then that doesn't count as being stingy with your things. The whole idea behind lending and doing this easy thing is there should be a good relationship. If a person's careless and they take advantage of your kindness, then you shouldn't be bitten twice. Right? So that's that kind of example. If that's the neighbor you have, that's the family you have. I've lent books to people. My teachers in Qom always said, never lend your books. That's one thing you should never lend. Lend everything else, but your books should say. I've lent books to people and they've come back highlighted. They've come back with coffee stains on them. Right? And so now I refuse. Even if a good friend comes and wants to borrow a book, I say, I'm sorry, I'll tell you how to buy it. I'll buy it for you if you want, but you can't have my copy. Because I've had too many bad experiences, even from good people. First, depends on the culture of your household. How do you treat your books? Do you leave them around? Does someone, a child carelessly, drop something on it? Does water spill on it? Things like that. So it may not be ill-intentioned, but if they're not going to honor the book the same way I honor the book, then they don't deserve my book. So that doesn't count as man'ul ma'un if it's because of a bad history with people. All right. Recite one last salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Any questions?
You mentioned about Imam Ali, three things. Is it part of the Native Balagha? What sermon is that?
It's in Khutbatul Muttaqeen. I don't remember the number of. Does anyone remember Khutbatul Muttaqeen? What number it is? I can't remember off the top of my head the number of the sermon, but it's it's also known as Khutbatul Humam. Humam, Ha Mim Alif Mim. Humam was the name of the companion that he shares this khutbah with. But yeah, if you look in the table of contents, you'll see Khutbatul Muttaqeen, and it lists many attributes of the Muttaqi, and this is one of them. Any other questions?
When you're praying and all of a sudden you start thinking about something else, do you think it is a waswasa from shaitan, or it is the shaitan within us? So Can you explain, please?
It can be a combination. It's hard to know what the source of these thoughts are. At least in the month of Ramadan, because we have this promise that shaitan is now tied up. So right now we're fully responsible. Whatever thoughts are coming to our minds, whatever distractions, these kinds of things, it's all on us. We can't pass the buck. So yeah, it's a combination. You can't know when you get the thought in your mind, because he doesn't have a voice that you recognize. It's a thought he inspires into your mind, this insinuation. It doesn't come in the form of a voice that we're hearing something. It's just that thought that crosses your mind. The same way the tawfiq of Allah also comes like that. You're asking for Allah to help you with something, and a thought comes in your mind which opens a door, and now it leads you to success. So it's hard to differentiate what these ideas are that are coming, if it's from me, from shaitan. But whatever the source is, we can refocus. We have the power to drive shaitan out. He has no power over us except as we are willing to accept. Right? So he can't force himself on us. All he can do is دعوتكم فاستجبتم لي فلا تلوموني ولوموا أنفسكم. In Surah Ibrahim, Shaitan on the Day of Judgment, he says, I didn't do anything. All I did was I called you and you answered. So don't blame me, blame yourself. That's Shaitan talking to those who listen to him on the Day of Judgment. So we have the power to drive him out. The best thing is just to stop. If you've ever prayed behind scholars in Qom when you go for a ziyarah, Iraq, I don't know if we have as much opportunity to pray behind high-level scholars, but in Qom there was quite an opportunity. Ayatul Makarim, for instance, when you pray behind him, he's constantly stopping and then repeating. Even a surah, he'll say Fatiha and he'll stop and he'll repeat the verse again. So most likely it's because of this. He's maybe lost the train of thought, or he wasn't as focused as he wanted to be, so he backed up and he did it again. So that kind of practice, just redo it. If you find yourself too distracted, just stop, take a breath, and then continue. There's nothing wrong. You don't have to just plow through the prayer. Take some time and focus on yourself, see what your thoughts are, so that as you're praying, you're constantly checking yourself. We only benefit that qabuliyah, the acceptance of the prayer. The hadith says that you only benefit from the prayer to the extent that you're focused in the prayer. And yes, getting out of hellfire, you get that if you've done it all correct. But in terms of now benefiting, it's a factor of the focus. So if the more distracted we are, the more useless that prayer is for us.
Is there a discipline or a method that you, during your life, that you've done prior to your namaz, where you quiet your mind and did something that helped you focus, complete focus? And what are some of those things that other scholars have guided you in?
Yeah. So this kind of, because prayer is such a pillar of the faith, obviously Allah has guided us and the Ahlul Bayt have guided us to it. So don't look to what I'm doing, or don't look to what any individual person is doing, but look for what are the teachings that they've given. They've given plenty of teachings on all of this. So there's no yoga or special stretches, or don't look for outside sources to find focus or find some benefit in Islam. Whatever we need is going to be in the teachings of Islam itself. So if you just go through the routine of things that are recommended. Right? So if you just skip straight to the wajib and you do wudu and you come and you say Allahu Akbar and you just start right away, then you haven't done the preparation. But if you go through the different adab and mustahabbat that are already recommended, not my personal prayer or someone else's personal prayer, but the things that are recommended. So, adhan and iqamah. Even if you're praying by yourself, it's still recommended to say adhan and iqamah. So now it's a lot of dhikr you're saying, that's time. If you say it with a beautiful voice, listen to a recording of it. That's a few, maybe 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes that you're spending doing dhikr, just standing there and saying this to yourself. Then there are actually, it's recommended to say 7 takbirs right before you start your prayer. And if you look in dua books, Mafatih has this, even the Risala, Tawzil Masail has the recommended du'as to recite between the takbirs. So you say 3 takbirs, there's a dua. You say another 2 takbirs, there's a dua, and then you say your takbiratul ihram, and then you say wajjahtu wajhiya lilladhi fatara as-samawati wal ard. So there's certain du'as that you can recite, and these du'as are amazing. If you read them and also focus on the meaning of them. So the more you can do those kinds of things, it's slowing you down. It's you're actually asking Allah. There's one du'a that comes in hadith where you're asking for tawassul of the Ahlul Bayt. You're saying, "Oh Allah, I'm standing here, with the through the connection of the Ahlul Bayt, I'm standing here before you." Right? So there's a whole dua for that, where you're trying to now seek their help and intercession also to get yourself focused on the prayer. So this, I don't want to plug this for any selfish reason, but I had done this series of lectures called Rediscovering Salah. Originally I'd done it in a center over 30 days during during Ramadan, and then I recorded it in a studio in Michigan. This is many years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And that 30 lecture series is, I think, the best lecture series we have on the spiritual aspects of prayer. The first, I think, 7 lectures are on focusing, hudurul qalb. So I refer you to that because right now I'm just saying whatever I remember. But there I actually laid it out in a systematic way. What are the recommendations? I actually said the du'as, referred to them so you can do them yourselves. And I spoke about the spiritual aspects. When you go into ruku', what does it mean? What's the symbolism behind this? Based on a hadith, not based on our own ideas. How far apart should your feet be? Where should your fingers be? How do you focus everything so your body is actually facing the qibla? So all of those recommended acts that are there, the spiritual aspects are in that lecture series. So if you look up that lecture series on YouTube, that's I think a really good systematic way to go through and try to make improvements to the prayer. Rediscovering Salah. You can get it on YouTube. On my website, islamicliteracy.org, I also have a playlist there. So it's just, I think it's a good kind of stepping stone. A lot of people have benefited from those ideas that are from the Ahlul Bayt.
Maulana, there's one question back here.
Oh, no, okay.
Assalamu alaikum. Is it true, Maulana, that after the seventh takbir can we recite Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin la sharika lahu wa dhalika umirtu wa ana minal muslimin?
Yes.
The ayah of the two ayahs 162 and 63 of Surah Al-An'am.
Yes. Yeah, so actually that comes after Takbiratul Ihram.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
After the seventh takbir.
Right.
Yes.
Correct. So it starts with Wajjahtu Wajhi. And so no one ever does this. Like, we get frustrated if you go to the Haram for Hajj and Umrah, and the Sunni says Takbiratul Ihram, Allahu Akbar, and it's silence for like 30 seconds, and you're wondering, what is he doing? And then he starts Bismillahir Rahman, or he doesn't say Bismillah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, right? And you wonder, what did he say for 30 seconds just now? Between Takbir and Fatiha. Well, they're acting on the Sunnah that we've given up.
Maulana, can you say the meanings of the ayat that I recited?
وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ. It's not exactly the ayah, it's called an iqtibas. It's taking from the verse, and it's a dua based on the verses. So وَجَّهْتُ وَجْهِيَ لِلَّذِي فَطَرَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا وَمَا أَنَا مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ وَبِذَلِكَ أُمِرْتُ وَأَنَا أَوَّلُ الْمُسْلِمِينَ. So it's taking from a few verses and adding some other things, and we have this dhikr that comes from that.
Jazakallah khair, thank you.
So that's, after Allahu Akbar, Takbiratul Ihram, then you say this dua silently. You can say it under your breath, not silently, but like bil ikhfat, you whisper it. Then you say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, also bil ikhfat. Then you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim out loud, if you're a man or in jama'ah. And then you say Fatiha. So these are all things that we can add to our prayer. The challenge, I think, in our congregations and this and that, the reason why you never see anyone do it, one of the reasons is because there's kind of a pressure on the imam to make things quick. Right? People don't have the patience. If you say a long prayer, then you get complaints, that surah was too long. Right? Too long in our time means like 6 lines instead of 3 lines of the Quran. Right? It's recommended in Fajr to say a long surah, like a 2-page surah, a 3-page surah. Right? If I say a 1-page surah, it gets too long. And people feel like, that's I need to get back to sleep, that was too long. Right? So our level of patience with prayer is less, and so then there's pressure on the imam not to do any of these mustahabbat and kind of quickly get through the prayer and leave out the mustahabbat, so that, for your sake. Right, so there's no way around it that I know of except that people have to have more patience and maybe encourage the imam that we do want to hear more, do want to do more, can you demonstrate it for us? Otherwise, you'll never actually see it demonstrated in a jama'ah prayer. It's only in books that you'll see it, and you do it privately. Yeah, it's a catch-22 that I'm not sure what the solution for that is.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you're familiar with Ayatollah Khomeini's Abdus Salat book.
Adab Salah, yeah.
Now, it's a difficult book. I might have misinterpreted it, but what it appeared to sound like, that he encouraged not to pray if your prayers are not solid, so to speak.
No, No, he definitely wouldn't say something like that.
What's that?
He definitely wouldn't say something like that. He wouldn't say, don't pray until...
Right. But he comments on... Maybe I need to reread that. But
So look at it again. And obviously, he would not say, don't pray until you can get it right. That's not the goal. You pray, you have to pray. Whether it's right or not, you have to do the best you can.
That's what I thought. It's a difficult book to interpret, so...
Yeah. That's not a good first book to start with. He was talking about Imam Khomeini's Adab al-Salah. So the two books of Imam Khomeini that we have in English, well, two main books are Adab al-Salah and the 40 Hadith. And they're both very challenging books. He's writing as an arif for kind of a very advanced type of a person. And it's not a good first book to start with. It wasn't meant for that anyway. Allah, we ask you to shower your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Help us, Allah, to adopt all of these teachings that we're learning from the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. Purify our heart of nifaq and riya and sum'ah and anything that distances ourselves from you. Bring us closer to you through all of our ibadah. Help us to resist the temptation of arrogance from praise and accept all of our acts of ibadah during this month of Ramadan and the rest of our lives. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام على الأئمة الهادين المهديين السلام على جميع أنبياء الله ورسله وملائكته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته